Speaker of the House and MLA for Calgary-Egmont. After question period today, the House will be dealing with third reading of the Appropriation Act as proposed by the Provincial Treasurer. Last evening, members of the Assembly sat until 1 o'clock in the morning dealing with third reading stage with various amendments of Bill 10, the Interprovincial Lottery Amendment Act. When the House rises today, it will not reconvene until next Wednesday.
Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce Bill number 41, the Gas Resources Preservation Amendment Act 1988. Mr. Speaker, the bill provides greater flexibility in dealing with gas removal permits, allows greater ability to deal with the movement of or removal of gas from the province contrary to conditions in
The Honourable Minister of Energy has moved first reading of Bill 41, Gas Resources Preservation Amendment Act 1988. Those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 41, Gas Resources Preservation Amendment Act 1988, introduced by the Honourable Dr. Weber, is now read a first time.
Karimbi.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill 38, the Pharmaceutical Profession Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides for the licensing of pharmacies, setting standards of practice for pharmacy, and disciplinary procedures to enforce those standards. Mr. Speaker, the bill includes a new regulated category of high-risk non-prescription drugs. There are new regulations reflecting the high standards for conduct of licensees, and it provides for their relationship to proprietors. Mr. Speaker, generally the Bill 38, contains many changes which reflect the modern status of the important profession of pharmacy.
The Honourable Member for Ponoka-Rimby has moved first reading of Bill 38, Pharmaceutical Profession Act. Those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 38, Pharmaceutical Profession Act, introduced by the Honourable Member, Mr. Johnson, is now read a first time.
Lloyd-Minster.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 23, the Maintenance Recovery Amendment Act 1988. The principles of the bill are to repeal Section 25 of the Maintenance and Recovery Act, which imposes a duty upon the Director of Maintenance and Recovery to ensure that maintenance payments obtained in favor of unwed mothers are in fact expended for the purposes specified in an agreement or court order.
The Honourable Member for Lloyd-Minster has moved first reading of Bill 23, Maintenance and Recovery Amendment Act 1988. Those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Bill number 23, Maintenance and Recovery Amendment Act, 1988, introduced by the Honourable Member, Mr. Cherry, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill number 38, the Pharmaceutical Profession Act, and Bill number 23, the Maintenance and Recovery Amendment Act, 1988, be placed on the order paper under Government Bills and Orders for second reading.
Having heard the motion by the Government House Leader, those in favor please say aye. Aye. Opposed please say no. So ordered.
Tabling returns and reports.
Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table the annual report of the Alberta College of Art as required by statute.
I am pleased to table today the annual report of the Office of the Ombudsman, Volumes 1 and 2.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Lethbridge West.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans can be very proud to have been the first province to have the Office of Ombudsman installed. We're fortunate today, Mr. Speaker, on the tabling of this annual report to have our Ombudsman with us. He is seated in your gallery, Mr. Alec Trewick, with his associate, Dixie Watson. I would ask them to stand, Mr. Speaker, now and to receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Minister of Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and members of the Legislative Assembly two bright and energetic school groups from my constituency who are on a tour of the Legislative Assembly today. These 48 students are grade 6 classes from J.E. LaPointe School in Beaumont. They are accompanied by their teachers, Diane Hutchison and Pam Yearwood. They are seated in the public and members gallery. I would ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Cardston.
Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to introduce to you and to the Assembly 16 grade 9 students from the Glenwood School, some 340 miles from here. We're happy to have them here today to tour this great facility, and it's a highlight in their school year of activity. They're seated in the public gallery, and they're accompanied by their teachers, Doug Smith, who is principal, and Helena Blumel. And I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I also have the privilege to introduce another group of students from my constituency, from the Hill Spring School, 14 grade 9 students. I'd like to introduce them to you and to the Assembly today, and they too have traveled a similar distance to be here and enjoy touring this great facility of our legislative building. They're accompanied by their teacher, Mr. Jamie Quinton, and parents Mark and Diane Smith, and parents Monty and Aileen Gibb. I'd ask them to rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, today I am pleased to be able to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly Mr. Ron Schuster from Falher. Mr. Schuster is president of the Alberta Pharmacists Association, and accompanying him is Mr. Larry Shipka, registrar of that same professional association. Mr. Speaker, the Bill 38, the Pharmaceutical Profession Act, introduced earlier today, has taken a great deal of diligent work on behalf of, or from these gentlemen and from the presidents and other members of the council for the past several years, and I would like to commend them for that work. Mr. Speaker, they are seated in the members' gallery, and I would ask them to now stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Member for Stettler, followed by Red Deer South.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of our colleague, the member for Chinook, it gives me a great deal of pleasure this morning to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly 32 fine, eager young people from the Coronation School, grade 5 students, They are accompanied by their teachers Donna Tupper, Tony Selsler, and parents Karen Horn, Lidwina Stenberg, Heather Twa, and their driver Melanie Robertson. I would ask that they rise in the members gallery and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Legislative Assembly 7 guests and friends from the city of Red Deer. They are teachers, Mr. Speaker, and some might suggest that they're taking Friday off to have an extended long weekend, but being the dedicated lot that they are, they're here assessing some of the tours and projects that students from the city of Red Deer might want to visit in the next little while. I would ask Mr. Klaus Opatrol, Mr. Robert Reed, Mr. Russ Gray, Jean Cameron, Roger Ward, Marilyn Ganger, and one of the most important people at G.W. Smith School, the Secretary, Brenda Frederick, to all rise in the members' gallery and receive the warm reception of this assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, schools are the lifeblood of inner-city neighborhoods. If they are closed, Mr. Speaker, frankly, they help spell the death of some of those communities. Mr. Speaker, on the other hand, functioning community schools can breathe new life into aging neighborhoods. Mr. Speaker, the decision by this government last year to chop the funding for community schools has had tragic effects in some of our inner-city neighborhoods. Mr. Speaker, and I would point out and remind the Minister that community schools in the long run can save money because they act as a preventive social service. My question to the Minister, what follow-up has the Minister done in the last year to find out about the problems that were created by the draconian 50% cut in community schools?
Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, I have met with the Community Education Association of Alberta and expressed to them the concerns that have been outlined in at least one report, the Ann Harvey report, with respect to community schools. I have suggested to them that with a budget of about $3 million, if my memory serves me correct, in terms of support from the province, over and above what is given the other 1,600 schools in the province, that there may well be ways in which those dollars can more appropriately be spread amongst those schools, particularly to recognize those who are operating as full community schools in the province. The Community Education Association, I know, is looking at alternatives in which that proportionate funding can be spent, and I look forward to their recommendations.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's well and dandy, but the Minister's well aware the Harvey report hasn't been released.
That's right.
Don't understand why. My question, Mr. Speaker, the community schools, if the Minister has been following up, should be aware of this, have virtually shut down weekend operations in compliance with the funding cuts. They had no choice. Is the Minister satisfied then that the small amounts of money that were saved by these cuts is worth it in terms of the community programs that have now been shut down in the inner cities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our leader of the opposition is wrong when he suggests that community schools only operate in the inner city areas. Certainly there is no question that the inner city areas deal with different sets of circumstances in their young people than do other parts of the province, but that's not restricted to community schools. The community school budget last year was reduced by 50%, but gave to those schools about $37,000 more than every other school in the province gets. That grant has been increased this year by 2%. I am of the view, and I believe others share that view, that there may well be a better way to be apportioning those funding, and I look forward from suggestions from the community to deal with it. In terms of the weekend use of schools in this province, that is not something that is restricted to extraordinary funding to community schools. There are a good number of schools across this province who use their facilities in a far broader range than simply the traditional 8:30 to 4:30 time frame without having a cent of extraordinary funding through community schools from this government.
very nice, and that's very nice, but the minister didn't answer the question, so she doesn't care that they've shut down. That's the only logical answer we can come from. My question is, and we're talking about the inner cities, not some dream world that the minister may think about, but weekend closure of the community schools has also led to an increase in vandalism in those particular schools. My question to the minister then, what consideration has the minister given to this problem in reaching funding decisions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would be delighted to see some of the direct correlation between the $37,000 additional dollars given to community schools and the Leader of the Opposition's contention that that has increased crime as a direct result. I would be happy to look at that. In terms of community schools and their future, I think there is a very important review that can be made. I think there may well be a better way in which those $3 million can be spent to meet some particular needs. And I would welcome some suggestions not only from the Community Education Association with whom I have met, but certainly from the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, one of the simple suggestions is put the funding back that you cut last year, Mr. Speaker. That should be self-evident. But, Mr. Speaker, in regard, the minister has indicated that not all inner-city schools are community schools, but they have more and more parent involvement. But, in fact, the 50% cut has, in fact, put a freeze against the establishment of any new community schools that are working well. And I just say this to the minister and I ask this question, isn't it unfair that the communities that could use this type of program will not have any opportunity in the future without cuts?
Mr. Speaker, that is simply not true. To say that these schools that receive an additional $37,000 over and above what other schools are getting have had all of their support base broken away is simply erroneous. And parent involvement in education in this province is something that we as the government feel very strongly about. And believe me, parents don't need community schools in order to get involved in their community. They're doing it right across this province.
Lethbridge West, supplementary.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister. As Nicholas Sharon Community School in Lethbridge is the first community school in Alberta, they are deeply appreciative of the fact it's funded at $37,000. Has the Minister given consideration to the matter of perhaps seeking support from within the community, particularly with the corporate sector, who I know, Mr. Speaker, have a very deep interest in education within the communities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think one of the important points that has to be made about education in 1988 is that there are more and more partnerships that can be struck with community, with business, with support groups that perhaps traditionally were not seen as being supportive of a basic education system. Those opportunities are there. The community school program focuses on some of those, but I'm not convinced it focuses on the learning environment in those areas, and there may well be some ways in which there can be some supportive corporate and other opportunities to draw into how important we all feel about education and how important it is to the advancement of our society.
Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lower income groups have been particularly hard hit by government policies as shown by the elimination of the equal opportunity funding programs in the Minister of Education's 1987 budget, which programs helped inner city and low income schools. And I'm wondering whether the minister, in light of those cuts, the minister can explain what her department is in fact doing or planning to do to help such inner income schools and schools in areas which have special demographic problems requiring special assistance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I guess one of the things that we're doing as a province is working with school boards. An important theme, particularly as we move through a new school act, which recognizes the very key role that school boards play in recognizing what local community must be as an important input. The equal opportunity funding was indeed reduced last year in the budget considerations. There were some remedial funds which were reduced, but there were also some funds with respect to special opportunities for learning, in particular for Native education projects Those dollars have been retained and in fact increased by the 2% in order to recognize some of the key learning difficulties, particularly in urban settings, though not restricted to them, that Native children have.
Your second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Acting Attorney General. It concerns the Gashua prosecution or non-prosecution, which was stayed for want of evidence. Will the Acting Attorney General confirm that at no time after the issuing of the summons by the Justice of the Peace in this matter did the Attorney General's Department or anyone on behalf of the Attorney General's Department consult the Justice of the Peace to see what the evidence was that he had got on the basis of which he issued the summons pursuant to Part 14 of the Criminal Code?
Not being privy to any conversations that may have taken place, Mr. Speaker, no, I can't categorically confirm that. In fact, I do believe there was evidence, photographs, as mentioned yesterday, that were produced, but evidence that would not, with specificity, be able to determine who, if anybody, was breaking the law.
Mr. Speaker, will the Acting Attorney General confirm that at no time between the issuing of the summons and the staying of it did anyone from the Attorney General's Department or anyone on its behalf consult the informant, Mr. Wilinko, as to what the evidence was that he wanted to bring, or in any way get in touch with him during that period?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I can't confirm whether there were any verbal conversations. I do know that there were written communications spelling out very clearly to Mr. Wilinko the procedures that he has to take before the prosecution can be continued with. And we're still waiting for that procedure to be taken.
Will the Acting Attorney General not agree that if the Crown insists on taking over a private prosecution, which appears to be their policy, Mr. Speaker, that either they should be, the private prosecutor should be allowed to get on with it, or the Attorney General's Department do something more than sit on its beam ends?
I'm not sure what end that is, Mr. Speaker, but the Department of the Attorney General's Act does not allow the Attorney General's Department to have an investigative role. The investigative role in any prosecution is in the realm of an enforcement agency such as the Police Department. In this particular instance would be the RCMP, it's in their jurisdiction, and or in this particular instance also the Department of Environment in the special, I forget the designation. The information is given to them. The evidence that the person laying the information has is given to them. They investigate it. Then that evidence is forwarded to the prosecutor. As I mentioned, there are two main prosecutors in Alberta, one in Calgary, one in Edmonton. And from there, the prosecution takes effect. In this particular instance, Mr. Wilinko has not produced that evidence so that a prosecution can take place.
Then why, Mr. Speaker, did the Attorney General's Department not take advantage of the thorough investigation stated to have been made by the Department of the Environment before the case was stayed, according to the letter of Mr. Lack of Standards and Approvals, a copy of which I supplied you with yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, the investigation by Mr. Lack or his department did not provide the evidence sufficient to go with the prosecution, and we're waiting for additional evidence. If the honourable member feels that the investigation wasn't adequate, I'd suggest they take another avenue and still provide the evidence. The Minister of the Environment may wish to supplement it, as that department is part of his department.
Mr. Speaker, I think perhaps I would just quote one line from the evidence provided to the Attorney General department by the investigators from Alberta Environment. I quote, "There was no evidence of any permanent structures or foundations being constructed on this site," end quote, dated May 4, 1988. That information was provided to the Attorney General's Department, Mr. Speaker.
Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you.
Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, it's sounding more and more to me as though we need an independent opinion as to how this matter has been handled. And I'm wondering whether now the acting Attorney General will provide some comfort to this through the public in this matter by agreeing to commission an independent legal opinion on this issue.
Honourable Minister, those are exactly the same words that the member used yesterday in a supplementary question. Thank you. Thank you. Chair recognizes the member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Ruling the question out of order?
Point of order, did you rule it out of order?
Is that a heckle or a rule?
Thank you. West Loch Sturgeon, main question.
Mr. Speaker, was that a heckle or a rule? Is it ruled out of order?
Main question, West Loch Sturgeon.
Point of order then, Mr. Speaker, then, for next. Okay. This question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, drought has reached epic proportions in most of the province except parts of the Peace River and south. And it's quite easy for the government maybe to forget this, surrounded with reflecting pools and water from all directions here. But meanwhile, though, Mr. Speaker, the government solutions that they have proposed have been very narrow and I think in many areas not available. Now, would the Minister be able to tell us when the pipe that has been purchased or is in the act of being purchased, plus the carts to transport it, is going to be available to the farmers?
Mr. Speaker, we were very reactive, recognizing that there could be a serious problem as it relates to the dryness within the province, and that is why some time ago the Premier announced our $20 million program as it relates to water supplies. He also established, under the chairmanship of the Minister of Environment, an ongoing committee so that we could assess it on a daily basis as to the seriousness of the problem within the province. In addition to that, we've got a number of interdepartmental committees working, plus a committee that is working in conjunction with the federal government to make sure that in the event that the seriousness does continue, we will be ready there to take corrective measures. I should share with the honourable member, as it relates to his question on the additional pipes that we have ordered for our dugout pumping, that to date we've met with a considerable amount of success in filling those dugouts. If anybody has experienced a severe water shortage, we do give them a priority, but we have had no complaints to date whereby we could not service those individuals who required them. The trailers are the hold-up to some degree because they have to be made and the tendering process was quickened, and we are hopeful that we will have all orders completed by mid-June, but we already have taken delivery of sufficient quantities so that we can meet the demands of those who are requesting our pumping equipment.
Mr. Speaker, I would like the government that's proactive rather than reactive. In the middle of June may be too late, but what does the Minister, could the Minister inform the House as to whether or not the forms for aid or forms to apply for pumps and rentals are available in all sections of this province? I've had a number of complaints that the agricultural people in charge in different areas do not have the forms, and therefore no forms, no water.
The question has been asked. Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member has individuals that are experiencing difficulties, we're more than happy to walk you through the process for him or for them, because we want to make sure that those individuals who are experiencing water shortages are taken care of, and that's the purpose of the program, and we're doing our level best. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, we haven't to date received any complaints as it relates to our delivery of that program.
Mr. Speaker, I must have a selective phone system. Mr. Speaker, also there's a problem that, as I'm sure the Minister knows and many of the other rural members, that hay prices have gone out of sight in the last couple of weeks. Is the Minister willing to commit his government to some sort of a subsidy, short-term subsidy, that would stabilize hay prices in order for the farmers to keep their herds going?
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the areas that does receive ongoing consideration under the committee of the Honourable Minister of Environment, and he may wish to supplement my answers. It is something that we will give due consideration to. But there's also another side to that whereby in the event that a program is implemented, we've seen in the past whereby hay prices have escalated to a greater degree. So there's two sides to it, but we are very open to any suggestions the Honourable Member does have, and they will be assessed on an ongoing basis under the chairmanship of the Honourable Minister of Environment.
Supplementary information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was my intent to supplement the previous question that the Honourable Member raised in terms of the application forms. Well, heck, at least 2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, I provided to all members of the Legislative Assembly pamphlets and documents and everything else, and gee, if the leader of the Liberal Party hasn't read his mail yet, then it's shocking to me. Those application forms are there, Mr. Speaker. They're available. Everybody in this assembly.
We got the final supplementary, West Longstreet.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Environment, I'm not the one that's out of water. I mean, the farmers are the ones to have the farms. Nor you out of words, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Order, please. 2 days ago, we went through this exercise with respect to more succinct supplementaries. I'd like to listen to yours now, please.
Mr. Speaker, the next supplementary I have, besides getting the rather jocular answer that the Minister of Environment is in charge of anything over there except shutting down guys.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order, please. Okay, now we are into the supplementary. No more wisecracks, just the supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's hard competing with you at times. Mr. Speaker.
All right. Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member. Thank you. That's sufficient. You've lost your... Order. Order. The member refuses to listen to the admonition of the chair with respect to supplementaries. You will do what has just occurred. Lost your final supplementary. Additional supplementaries. Thank you. Order. Order. Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair recognizes Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, I refuse to sit down. If you want to throw me out, you can. But I, the public of this province, have a right to know what that incompetent department is doing.
Order, please. Order, please, Honourable Member. Chair recognizes Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker,
Order, please, Honourable Member. Order.
I haven't done anything wrong here, except
Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, I have a
Thank you, Honourable Member. Take your place.
Speaker.
Take your place, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I have a supplementary, and people of
Thank
this
you.
province have to know what that bunch of incompetents are doing.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your solicitous advice. The House stands adjourned until 20 minutes to the hour, and the time will be taken from question period. That's fine. The House adjourned until 20 to the hour.
I'm just going to clarify that with him. I think I misunderstood.
Order, please. Chair recognizes Vegreville. Vegreville, please. Vegreville. Thank you, Honourable Member for Westlock Sturgeon. Order, please. On a number of occasions in this session, but especially within this past week, the House has dealt with the matter of having the more succinct supplementaries. Throughout the course of the sitting, there has been ample leeway given to supplementaries. But indeed, 2 days ago, and again with some reference yesterday, but again this was brought to the attention of all honourable members. And in that light, that the interruptions were made, or the directions were given to the honourable member today by the chair. In addition to that, the chair gave some admonitions with respect to this one particular supplementary, at least twice, and that was ignored by the member for Westlock Sturgeon. Therefore, on the third time of extraneous information being put in, the chair then ruled that the member does not have the right to third supplementary. And that is indeed clearly within the direction of the chair in question period. Chair now recognizes Vegreville.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please, honourable member. Honourable member. Perhaps the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon would like to take the matter under further consideration rather than have the chair have to deal with the matter of Standing Order 24. Member for Vegreville.
Speaker, I'm aware of the responsibility. I believe that as far enough I have.
Okay. All right. Thank you, honourable member. Take the place, please. Honourable member. Once again, the chair refers the member to Standing Order 24, subsection 1 and subsection 2. The chair has to assume that the honourable member has indeed read those standing orders and is aware of the full effect that takes place. This now is at least the first time, full time, but more than one, of warning the member. So the member would hopefully take that under advisement and not have the rest of the time of the House in question period be marked away, but also would take due regard for the parliamentary process in this province. Thank you. Vegreville. Thank you. Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Minister of Agriculture, seeing as how he's given some retroactive consideration to the $20 million drought assistance program, if he would consider extending that to some date in the fall, perhaps October 1st instead of January 1st, recognizing that it's nearly impossible to dig a dugout in the middle of winter, and that many people anticipating the problem undertook those projects in the fall.
Mr. Speaker, we've indicated our openness to examine all suggestions brought to us, and I appreciate the suggestion that has just come forward from the honourable member for Vegreville, and maybe I could use this opportunity to underscore, as he's indicated, we have made all the programs that were not retroactive to the 1st of January this year, so that in the event that an individual did drill a well or construct a dugout, he will have funding made available to him. But we will take his suggestions under consideration, as I indicated, under the chairmanship of the committee put together by the Premier, chaired by the Minister of Environment.
To the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister attended a meeting in St. Paul a few weeks ago, and there were special requests relative to the drought in the area. Has the Minister considered those requests, and can he report to the Assembly at this time any recommended changes?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member for Littlebow, I sent off, I believe it was 2 days ago, a letter in response to the meeting and carbon copied my colleagues who were affected by that, the honourable member for St. Paul and the Minister of Public Works, whereby because of the representations we did inject the retroactivity, and it was because of that meeting in St. Paul and the strong representations brought forward, the meeting in Goodrich and the strong representations brought forward by the member from St. Paul and the Minister of Public Works, that the retroactivity clauses were included. There are other specific requests as it related to an actual payment on a per quarter basis.
is something that we indicated to them at this time we could not accept.
Vermilion Viking, final supplementary.
Yes, to the Minister of Environment. I have a community that's in the process of using the temporary water transmission line program, but they would like the structure to remain permanently there for future use. Will the funding be the same if they do proceed to put in a more temporary type transmission line to protect them against this problem in the future?
Mr. Speaker, there's going to be some degree of flexibility to be allocated to the program under the Water Community Supply Program. And while though that aspect of the program concentrates in the temporary nature of it all, the honourable members should be aware that the Minister of Transportation and Utilities and his department's involved as well with the Community Water Supplies Assistance Program. So if there's an argument that an individual community can make to take a temporary facility and turn it into a more permanent facility, that's one that we would bend over backwards to try and accommodate.
Member for Little Bow on behalf of the Representative Caucus, followed by Stony Plain.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Advanced Education, and it stems from the announcement in the speech from the throne recorded in Hansard of April the 3rd, 1986, where the announcement was made of the new $80 million post-secondary endowment fund. And could the Minister indicate at this time the distribution that's been made to the three somewhat major universities, the University of Lethbridge, University of Calgary, and University of Edmonton, relative to funds from that endowment fund?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the details of the dollar amounts other than to say they're very significant. I guess the bottom line is to report to the House that the program is turning out to be far more successful than we had planned on it being. Already, just 7 weeks into this fiscal year, there's only $2 million left of this year's allotment, and the total $80 million fund is within $7 million of being taken up.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. The two large universities of Edmonton and Calgary rather have the inside track on national fund contributions. Has the Minister considered any changes in the ground rules to the fund in terms of compensation or matching grants in terms of the smaller institutions?
No, we haven't, Mr. Speaker, because to date the institutions generally have been very innovative in seeking out funds. I recall the last one that went to one of the smaller institutions, Banff Centre, got a $500,000 contribution from McLean Hunter Publishing Company out of Ontario. So, and University of Lethbridge has been very successful also in getting out of province funding. So it hasn't appeared to be a problem yet. The problem has been the good news, bad news part of the thing, in that the good news is they're gaining contributions at a far greater rate than anybody ever dreamt would happen. And the bad news, of course, if I can use that term, is that with our current fiscal situation, we're having to get special warrants to cover those matching grants.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, we're just 2 years into the program of what I believed would be a 5-year program. Would the Minister be considering at this time an increase of that $80 million allotment that was outlined in the speech from the throne, April 3rd, 86?
That is something that will have to be considered, I suppose, and we are aware of that problem. The original program announced in 1980 was 80 for the 80s, $80 million for the decade of the 80s to be matched, and that was used up by 1985. So phase 2, this endowment and incentive fund, was brought in, another 80 million for what was left of the 80s, and 2 years and a couple of weeks, it's almost gone. So obviously we're tapping a market out there that's very supportive of the system, and we want to maintain that encouragement if we're able.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, is there any consideration in changing the 2-for-1 formula to a 1-to-1 formula?
Mr. Speaker, those are the kinds of details, I suppose, that could be looked at. That is the one that has been very successful and attractive to major donors in establishing permanent endowments for special chairs and special programs. And so we will be reviewing that, but it has been the very attractive part of the total program.
Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Advanced Education, he indicated that there's almost a complete commitment of this year's fiscal allocation for the endowment fund, and I wonder if he could make a commitment today to the people at the institutions of the province that he will, in fact, ensure that there are adequate resources to meet all of the commitments that are submitted by the institutions in this fiscal year.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we've been able to do that. So far, honorable members will recall the passage in the last fiscal year of two special warrants totaling $38 million for that very purpose. I can't give at this point a guarantee that that will happen again, but we do consult with institutions prior to them getting the final donations that their donors' gifts comply with the program. And of course, once we give that approval, the commitment is there to match the funds.
Vermilion Viking.
Yes, to the Minister, there's been some concern that the donations in kind rather than cash might have been abused a bit. Are you looking at a program that targets more cash donations than those speculating in kind?
Mr. Speaker, that correction was made during the interim period between phases 1 and phases 2 of the program I outlined. There were some problems with respect to matching various kinds of equipment and things that were donated rather than cash, and I believe most of those difficulties have been overcome.
Member for Stony Plain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct a question to the Provincial Treasurer. The topic is Principal Group. Over the past 2 days, several constituents have called to express very negative reaction to the reports, that is, the print and electronic media, alleging that this government is contemplating or considering a $150 million purchase of real estate investments connected with the Principal Group. Will the Provincial Treasurer comment on the accuracy and perhaps the source of these reports?
Mr. Speaker, I would I can't perhaps talk about the source reports. I can give the government policy, Mr. Speaker, and that is that until the Code Inquiry has completed its review, full review of the investigation, and I suppose, although the Ombudsman is not here, and when the Ombudsman has completed his review, Mr. Speaker, I would imagine at that point the government would assess its position in light of the comments made by Mr. Code. I should say that I understand that this rumor was started from discussions picked up by the Edmonton Journal, and I have attempted to make it clear that we are not at this point, the government is not at this point contemplating any sort of assistance to the principal companies. As I said, we would wait until Mr. Code's inquiry is completed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the Provincial Treasurer's articulate, crystal clear, and detailed answer, which I think should clear up any uncertainty created by this rumor, I will pass on any further supplementaries.
Thank you for the statement. Edmonton Kingsway. Edmonton Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, it would seem to me that the Treasurer could now reconsider very seriously the 35% proposal that we put forward. It would not in any way depend on the Code Inquiry, or does not in any way depend on the Code Inquiry, or any other problems that, excuse me, problems in the long term.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I suppose that it's not unreasonable that we would consider it, Mr. Speaker. First of all, as an idea, first of all, the way in which restructuring of financial institutions has taken place in this province has been that the non-producing real estate or some of the foreclosed real estate has been transferred to another entity and therefore cleaning up the balance sheet. And in that sense, I would draw the member's attention to the very successful way in which Northwest Trust is restructured, using not 1 cent of the government of Alberta's money to restructure that company. It's now operating at extensive profits right now, Mr. Speaker, and the real estate is parked in another vehicle. And that has allowed two things to happen. And it allows for a managed disposition of the property, and it in fact does allow a financial institution, the one in this case Northwest Trust, which is the example, to operate very effectively. Now this is not just a new idea. This has happened in a variety of other financial institutions, including the credit union system and to some extent the Heritage Trust Fund, Heritage Company, which was operating here at Edmonton. So the notion itself is not new. We could consider it, Mr. Speaker, but as I've clearly stated before, in our view, it would be inappropriate to do anything to interrupt the process because it's a very difficult unraveling of the transactions. We would not want to cloud the issue by moving ourselves, but once the code inquiry is finished and once the Ombudsman has made his report, then we will look at all possible options.
Thank you. Edmonton Avonmore. First, with respect, honourable member, the chair has decided to add the 9 minutes of the adjournment back on the question period. Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister responsible for women's issues, we have heard that 27% of Canadian women are victims of sexual assault, that the number reported to the Sexual Assault Centre in 1987 was 17% higher than the number reported in 1986. In addition, a recent survey at the University of Alberta revealed that 1 out of 9 Alberta women in married-type relationships is battered by her partner. In view of the fact that there are only 7 or 8 sexual assault centres and 14 shelters for battered women in this province, does the Minister consider that available resources are anywhere near adequate?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have said time and time again that we would like to do more and more to help the victims of sexual assault. And in fact, the Minister for Social Services may wish to supplement my answer. In fact, we have been allocating more resources into the shelters for women in Alberta in the last 2 years. We've given them substantial increases in their budget.
Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that many women do not have access to the basic minimum service of a crisis line, will the Minister responsible for women lobby the Minister of Community and Occupational Health to establish forthwith a province-wide toll-free crisis line?
Mr. Speaker, that subject has been discussed. I know that in many communities there is a crisis line, and certainly it's funded through the Family and Community Social Services at the FCSS program, and many local communities have chosen to establish that sort of help in their area. A province-wide hotline. There are pros and cons to that suggestion, one of them being that the nature of the crisis is so immediate, and the woman who is calling in needs such immediate attention where she is, not in some centralized depot in one of the major cities, that one would have to be very careful to ensure that there was somebody within a few minutes to come to her aid. And there's some question as to whether a hotline province-wide would offer that kind of service.
Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that even with treatment intervention, not just crisis intervention, that it takes 2 to 5 years to recover from a sexual assault, what commitment is the Minister willing to make to ensure that such treatment is available so that all women that have experienced violence may regain their health?
Mr. Speaker, I presume the honourable member is using the World Health Organization definition of health, and I would endorse that because it does mean total mental and physical health. And there is no question that when one has been assaulted, there is an ongoing trauma to a person which isn't immediately healed. However, we have one of the best healthcare systems in Alberta, and those facilities and counseling, professional counseling to help a woman come through the experience are widely available in this province.
Through the final supplementary by Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, to the Solicitor General, given that most rapists and wife batterers are repeat offenders, and given that treatment programs for such individuals are virtually non-existent, what steps is the Solicitor General willing to commit himself to ensure treatment being made available to all offenders that can benefit from such treatment while they are serving their sentences?
Mr. Speaker, I echo the concerns for this type of offense and for the victims of this type of offense. Most instances where people have been prosecuted and found guilty, their incarceration usually puts them beyond the realm of the Solicitor General of Alberta's jurisdiction in the fact that they get more than a 2-year sentence. I'm more than happy to work with our department to see if there is some way we can institute a rehabilitation program specifically to this offense.
Permitted Viking supplementary?
Yes, to the Minister of Social Services. To clarify some of the statistical information that we hear today in reference to abuse, could the Minister indicate that if somebody was sexually abused in a home 12 times during a year, and it was reported on those incidents 12 times, is it recorded statistically as one incident of abuse or 12?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in terms of a number of studies that have been done with respect to abuse, I believe that the data has been compiled in a different way, and that is one of the problems that we have in terms of comparisons across the country, because we are not necessarily always comparing apples with apples, if you will. In terms of the direct question, I would have to ask the honourable member what particular study he may be looking at or what particular reported information he may be looking at. But regardless of how it's reported, Mr. Speaker, it is a very serious problem.
Member for Bow Valley, followed by Edmonton and Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, my questions, I suppose, should have been to the Assistant Minister of Agriculture, but I will ask him of the Minister. In southern Alberta, there's been a severe drought, and as it pertains to drought insurance, I've had some of my constituents calling, saying there's a limit to the time when you should seed and be able to collect drought insurance. And as there is no moisture, is there been any discussions with the federal minister to see if the date of seeding can be delayed or eliminated?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report to the honourable member that the Associate Minister of Agriculture has had communications with our federal counterpart, the Honourable John Wise, to have him take into consideration the recommendations the honourable member has just made to us, so that there is greater flexibility, so that our farmers in southern Alberta can take advantage of putting their cattle onto those crops and still have some applicable insurance coverage.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Right now, if these farmers go out and disturb their land in an attempt to seed, why all they're doing is causing erosion problems. The ideal thing would be to wait for rain, but if it doesn't rain before the end of June and they don't seed the crop at all, will they still be eligible for some type of crop insurance?
Mr. Speaker, that is an area that the Associate Minister is working on, along with the Chairman of Hail and Crop Insurance, the Honourable Member from Whitecourt. They are working together with our federal counterparts so that we can come up with some fair and equitable program for our farming population. Just as it relates to soil conservation also, I'm sure the honourable member did note the communique that came forward from the premiers that are meeting in BC, whereby there is going to be an elevation of that concern so that we can have greater soil conservation methods, and the honourable member for Chinook also introduced legislation so that we can upgrade our support for soil conservation methods.
That you have to declare the amount of seeded acres for crop insurance sometime previous to the present date, and given the fact that if it doesn't rain, they would be damaging their soil to seed, would the farmers be able to collect crop insurance on their declared acres that they would have seeded had there been some rain to germinate it.
Mr. Speaker, those are areas that are presently under consideration, and hopefully we will have a response to the honourable member very shortly.
Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Concerning the Orem dump site, many residents of my constituency and other areas of northeast Edmonton and beyond are concerned about the environmental dangers of the dump site chosen by the city. Those who contact me believe that the groundwater activity in the area makes the site environmentally unsafe and that no amount of engineering wizardry can make it safe. Can the Minister of Environment confirm that it is ultimately the responsibility of Alberta Environment to judge the environmental safety of the dump site and the engineering plans for it?
Mr. Speaker, the process that follows a threefold process. Number one is a local municipality will make a decision in terms of a location of a particular landfill. Then once that local municipality makes a decision, that decision is then forwarded to the local Board of Health, and it is the Board of Health which determines whether or not the application will be upheld for siting. When the local Board of Health gets the application, the local Board of Health then can refer the application to Alberta Environment for a technical environmental review, and Alberta Environment will determine on the basis of the information provided to it whether or not the site is suitable from an environmental point of view and from an environmental point of view only. This is a process that we followed very successfully and well throughout the province of Alberta, and the one that happens once, twice, 3 times a week.
Time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to continue. Will the Minister commit himself to giving a thorough environmental investigation of this site and outline today what research studies or environmental impact assessments he will carry out to investigate the environmental concerns?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've just indicated already in the previous question that this is the process that Alberta Environment follows with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of landfills that have been established in the province of Alberta over the last number of years. And of course, if the Board of Health approves the site, if the Board of Health refers the project to Alberta Environment, which is the process that is available, then of course Alberta Environment will undertake a very thorough analysis from a purely technical environmental point of view. I would point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that what I am encouraging as the Minister of the Environment, of course, is the reduction in the number of landfills in the province of Alberta. And since 1980, we've seen a reduction of some 1,350 landfills in this province to a current inventory of approximately 800. I believe that there is a much more innovative approach to controlling garbage that exists in our society, and anybody who's heard me give a speech in the last 2 years, and needless to say all honourable members who have had the benefit of those speeches will know that in my humble opinion and view, the last alternative, that one we should be following in 1908 in dealing with garbage, is in fact the creation of a hole in the ground and simply burying it so it becomes out of sight. We can be much more innovative. Edmonton, I believe, is right on the leading edge of providing a new technology for everybody, and surely we can find a very positive alternative to simply a hole in the ground.
We get a video. Thank you very much. The Minister has taken some commendable but very halting steps in what is a long journey that should have already been finished towards safe disposal. Has he set any specific targets in terms of recycling and other alternatives to reduce landfilling by, say, 30 or 40% over the next 3 years in the province?
Mr. Speaker, it's always amazing to me how a member of the NDP party gets up and has 4 questions. They ask question number 2, have you taken any steps to reduce? Well, in question number 3, have you taken any steps? Well, in the response to question number 2, I gave the statistics. I indicated since 1980 that there has been a reduction in the number of landfills in this province from 1,350 to some 800. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the difficulty the Speaker has periodically in trying to get people to deal with the question. But I answered the question, Mr. Speaker. In addition to that, we've outlined and made public in the spring of...
Thank you, Honourable Minister. By your own admission, you answered the question. Therefore, final supplementary.
Thank you. Replacing a whole bunch of small landfills with a few big ones is not an improvement. I was talking about the volume of garbage buried, not the number of sites. Now, in view of the conflict that seems to be developing between Edmonton and the county of Strathcona, and that kind of conflict is almost inevitable in the situation of planning a dump site. Will the minister recognize that it's time for the province and especially his department, not the health units, to show some real leadership in finding alternatives to landfilling, not just some small window dressing projects?
Mr. Speaker, once again, I'm absolutely, totally amazed. In September of 1986, the Minister of the Environment announced, as a result of the meeting with the Mayor of the City of Edmonton, the Reeve of the County of Strathcona, the Mayor of the City of Fort Saskatchewan, as a result of meetings that were held here in this building, the four of us, that the province of Alberta would allocate to these four municipalities a certain amount of dollars to, in fact, investigate alternatives. And we have done that, Mr. Speaker. Studies have been done, studies have been made available. Since that time as well, Mr. Speaker, we have of course had the benefit of the very exciting Environment Council of Alberta report on recycling. Since that time, we have opened in Alberta on September 11, 1987, the world's best fully integrated special waste management plant. The NDP, of course, has been totally opposed to it. We uphold the Alberta Beverage Container Act that I'm attempting to bring changes to. The NDP told me 2 days ago in this House they were opposed. Get rid of all those small businessmen, they said. Get rid of that, do that. Mr. Speaker, we have had now in Riley, Alberta, a very exciting composting project, and in a couple of weeks from now I'm going to bring in their mascots in this assembly and introduce them to them. Mr. Speaker, there have been literally dozens and dozens of initiatives with respect to this matter all over Alberta. And I want all members of the NDP to take the time to read the new environmental newspaper we're going to make available to all citizens of Alberta in the next number of days.
Thank you. Stony Plain supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the critical comments pertaining to the Alberta environment made by the member for Edmonton Glengarry, I feel compelled to ask the minister if he would comment on the report submitted by the National Task Force on the Environment. That is, the report which commented on Alberta's efforts towards conservation and its strategy, and that report which was submitted to the National Council on the...
Thank you. It's a very long supplementary. House needs to learn a bit more about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The National Task Force on the Environment Economy was a very exciting report that was written in 1987 by 5 ministers of the environment in the country of Canada, leaders of industry and leaders of national environmental groups. That report was taken to the United Nations, Mr. Speaker. Table there, it's a reflection of the Brundtland International Commission report. It said that Alberta was, and will remain the leader in environmental mitigation protection.
Thank you on that. Thanks very much. Question period has expired. Early in question period, there was some concern as raised by the member for Calgary Buffalo and Westlock Sturgeon with respect to the ruling out of order by the chair of the supplementary by the member for Calgary Buffalo. It was so entirely repetitious, it was almost word for word the same question which was asked yesterday in this House, and that was the reason for which that member was called to order at that time.